In recent days, the news has been full about the apparent failure of the Texas power system in the energy state of the United States that prides itself on its role in the energy sector in the US. However, there are a few things about the US power system that are not evident to an international audience. The interesting thing about the US power system is that there's no real US-wide power system. You essentially have three systems with very little interconnectivity and rather old transmission infrastructure. There is one system for the eastern United States, one for the western United States, with the Rockies being a rough demarcation line between them, and a separate power system for Texas, basically managed by one utility, ERCOT. There are minimal interconnections allowing for power trade between Texas and the rest of the country. So when the recent polar vortex hit Texas with unprecedented cold temperatures, it was a perfect storm for the Texas power system that came close to total failure. Texan political authorities had decided largely deregulate the power sector and place its management in the hands of private companies in an environment of low wholesale prices. To make profits, these firms minimized investment in infrastructure or in upgrading the grid or in investing in protection against rare events, which are becoming less rare. And this meant that generating infrastructure was more or less unprotected from the unprecedented freezing temperatures. This is actually rather surprising. A similar weather event happened in 2011. There were similar concerns being expressed by everybody. A huge report with recommendations for change and infrastructure upgrades was issued, and apparently nothing was done. As natural disasters increase, the risks to power system infrastructure will increase with serious potential consequences for the economy and for people. And it's largely for this reason that the Biden administration has put so much emphasis on upgrading infrastructure in their stimulus plans. The neglect of infrastructure, with the lack of interconnectors to trade power with other transmission systems, brought the power sector closest to systemic failure in its history. Given the hyper-partisan political environment in the US, the Texan Republican administration sought to scapegoat renewables as the cause of this failure. The reality of the situation, however, is that fossil-based generation still accounts for almost 88% of the Texas system. It was the gas infrastructure that accounts for the bulk of power generation in Texas that essentially failed. Generating infrastructure froze, meters froze, and pipelines froze, slowing down the flow of natural gas. The utility and the state had failed to invest in cold weather protection so as to keep prices low, and when the polar vortex arrived, it hit thermal generation very hard, taking more than 1/3 of power out of the system as unprotected gas pipelines froze and thermal generation ran out of fuel. The real question that will have to be answered by power system managers and politicians is that although the information about the weather events was known, why were adequate contingency measures not taken? Now, this leads to questions of renewables, and specifically wind power, which Texas has prided itself as being the leader in the United States on. The weather prediction algorithms that are available are quite accurate. It is well known to operators that wind generation decreases in winter, as it did this winter. The reality was that actual wind production outperformed expectations and was supplying power to the grid in accordance with expectations. The event has raised major questions about the future of the power sector that was privatized and deregulated and limped along for years with minimal investment in upgrading infrastructure in the face of political demands for lower prices. The day of reckoning for the Texas energy system has arrived. The mistakes of the past cannot continue as they have been, and a moment of truth has arrived for the decision-making of the future.